To me, those are all just anxiety producing cycles that you go through where knowledge is really power. Maybe you should be investing in a Roth, maybe you shouldn't. It's a complicated question. But if you don't understand it at all and you hear that, then it's, I've really screwed up my retirement and it's all bad. What am I going to do?
Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Paycheck. I'm Paula Christine. So in the past weeks, we've been talking about mindset and retirement planning and credit. So we're going to continue that conversation about retirement planning and money therapy and how to overcome some of the issues you have with money. So today's guest is John Hankins, and he's from Financial Therapy Me, and we're going to talk about retirement and financial therapy. So welcome, John.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Okay, so how do you get in the financial therapy field?
Well, financial therapy is really, it's defined generally by the Financial Therapy Association, which has been around since 2009.
Okay.
And it is really the intersection of a bunch of financial planners who were sort of frustrated with not having enough training around all the emotional stuff that they saw coming into their office, and
Yes.
mental health professionals who felt like they didn't have enough training when they saw all the money stuff coming into their office.
Yes. Two definitely different fields.
Absolutely. And so it is a combination of those fields. The membership of the Financial Therapy Association is about 50-50 split between those two professions. So it's
Okay.
a very fruitful synergy between them. When you use the term financial therapy, it brings to mind, therapy, mental health stuff. And so I want to clarify that the typical mental health professional who's a certified financial therapist is going to be heavily on the therapy side. Okay. They're going to be, treating anxiety, depression, all of those sorts of things. They may have put a stake in the ground and said, "Hey, I really want to deal with your emotional issues around money. This is the heart of my practice." Or they may simply be saying, "I really want to be able to handle this in a way where I have some training and can be a positive force."
So when you're working with a client, we all know that our money mindset develops as a child. And we take that through to our adulthood unless you realize that that needs to be changed or come in contact with someone who says, "Hey, we need to work on that because that's how you handle money. That's your thoughts about money." And it's very important to change them if they have any negative or scarcity to a positive mindset so that you can go forward, because life is meant to be abundant, whatever abundance means to you. But you can't do that if you have that fear that, the ground's going to fall out from underneath you. So you have to kind of change that to understand why you feel the way that you do when it comes to money. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yes. So I also know that you talk about a lot to do with retirement planning and the mindset that goes into that, because we spend all our life accumulating money, but then when it comes into retirement, it's a whole different phase. Now we're looking to have income for as long as we live, and a lot of people enjoy their coworkers and the things that they have done in during their work life, but forget what goes into retirement planning when you don't have to go to work every day. What is that life going to look like? And that's a whole different world for a lot of people, and they just don't know what that's going to look like or how to even adapt into not going to work every day.
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of different aspects to that. One of the things that's really changed in our generation is this move from a defined benefit program to a defined contribution program. And what I see are people both getting ready to retire and who have already retired, where the complexity of managing all this stuff themselves is pretty overwhelming, pretty anxiety producing. You have to understand, what's really, how Social Security really work, what are all the rules. And a lot of people make serious mistakes because they don't understand the rules. What do I do with my IRA or my 401k? What does this mean? What are the tax consequences? There's just a whole raft of stuff that the average person simply isn't prepared for. Now, the financial planning world is there to help you with that. But what I view is, in some of my work, is I'm kind of the gateway drug for financial planning. That I see the people that have, I don't know what to do. I don't know how long this is going to last. All this stuff, how does it all come together? But I'm scared to go talk to somebody. I can't bring myself to sit down and have a conversation. Or I had a conversation 5 years ago with a guy, and they put together a plan, and they gave me the plan, and I got home and I put it in a drawer, and I've never looked at it since.
Right.
Or,
well, you need to find someone to work with for sure, and not before you're ready to retire, but many years ahead of that.
True. And in a lot of cases, what you get is someone that has come with whatever plan you're in your job, right? Here's a guy, we have a financial planning firm, you can talk to our financial guy. And very typical outcome of that is, okay, yeah, they told me what to do. I'm making these investments and I haven't looked at them in 10 years. I'm contributing, but I'm not managing, and I'm afraid to manage. I've got all these statements. I'm afraid to open them. It makes me anxious when I think about it, on and on. So,
well, I also think they also have the fear of talking to someone because they're afraid they didn't do enough, and even though instead of going and finding out the answers, they just kind of delay having that conversation. A lot of people retire when they don't have enough because they didn't sit down with a financial planner to make sure that they do have enough. Then their assets are in the wrong place, and then they take Social Security when they shouldn't. Maybe they should have delayed it. So they don't make educated or logical decisions because it's fear-based, because they're afraid that they didn't do enough or they're not savvy enough to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's very true. So the work of the financial therapist, whether it is on the mental health side or as a financial planner who's been trained in financial therapy, who starts not with the, let's get all the numbers down, but starts with, let's talk about how you feel about this and what are your fears? How can I help you allay those and let's move forward is really a key part of this whole process. And the bottom line is you just have to meet the client where they are. Maybe they're ready to start talking about the numbers. Maybe they have, maybe they've already retired, but they grew up in a household that was influenced by their grandparents from the Depression. It says, I can never take money out of a bank account. I'm not, always save, never spend. They're just paralyzed in the deaccumulation phase. Here, I've got to now support myself with this, or they, keeps them awake at night of like, hey, my guy told me my life expectancy is 30 years and I got to make this money last me for 30 years and I have no clue how to do that. And oh my God, the stock market just crashed yesterday. It's the end of the world. There's just all of these competing forces that you can't control. You need to understand them. You need to understand you're not in it alone. You need to understand that this is a time to enjoy your life, not sit in a, fear-based posture over how you make this work. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I am saying that there are ways to make it so that it works.
Well, I think I have this conversation a lot with people. Again, it goes back to you should be working with a financial planner as early as you can. I mean, even if you can start when you're in your 20s after you have your first job, first official full-time job, and even then don't have to wait for that, and start having these conversations all along so that you're more educated, you're more prepared throughout your life for all financial decisions than to just not avoid talking to someone until it's that time and now you want to retire and you don't know what questions to ask, and maybe there would have been things you should have done earlier that you didn't do, but that's okay, because it doesn't matter what you did in the past, it's how you go forward. And I think that the sooner you have that conversation and with someone that you trust and you start to develop a plan, because when I work with clients, we're starting as soon as we can to develop that retirement plan, so that when that time comes in retirement, there is no fear, because we've eliminated those fears throughout the years. But most people, I think, have a hard time even having that initial conversation, because sometimes they're shame-based, or it's fear, or it's guilt that I didn't do what I was supposed to do, and those are the ones that sit back and wait till it's kind of a little late.
They're the casualties that I see. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you that the sooner you can do that, the better. And I look at my own experience where I did my own financial planning. I was already kind of a finance guy in my career, and so I put together my own my own retirement plan. I started about 20 years before I retired, and so I was really able to get my arms around that. But I'm kind of an unusual case in that sense. But yeah, absolutely. Anything we can do to encourage people to work with a financial plan, or to recognize all of these piece parts. And to me, the golden rule is start early, take advantage of compound interest, have your plan, keep contributing, all of those pieces. Do you know any of the work of Hal Hershfield?
I don't think so.
Okay, he's a psychologist who's done a lot of work in ways to get people to participate in 401k plans. He's worked with, he's done studies with major corporations, like, okay, we have people coming in, they can sign up. We noticed that 40% of our new employees don't sign up. What can we do to encourage them to sign up? And one of the things he's done is this whole idea of your future self. Maybe you've heard about these experiments where he showed people, he's aged them and said, okay, here's what you're going to look like 20 years from now. They had a control group where they don't
aged your face or
your face.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it has a control group.
That could be scary.
Yeah. They don't see anything. It's like, okay, make some selections for a plan, how much you're going to put into it. The other group, the experimental group, are seeing these images of themselves 20 or 30 years from now. So they're making this connection with their future self when they're going to be close to retirement, and they are much more ready to make those decisions and to start saving for the future, because they've formed this connection with their future self. So there's this whole continuum. I mean, I work with people. I've worked with a lot of men in their 40s, and I use that model to some degree. I try to get them to really start thinking about their future self. Okay, tell me, what do you see when you're 60? What does the world look like? How old are your kids? Let's form a picture that you're connected with, and then let's get you to start investing in that picture.
I like that, your future self. I'm going to steal that.
Okay. Yeah, you should check out his work. He's a really fascinating guy.
I will check that out. But I guess, because I do that future self with my for myself with my, visual, when I visualize, and I kind of, where do I see myself in the future, and kind of live that future self today, as always working towards that. And it does help you put things in context about where you can see. But if you can't visualize yourself 20 or 30 years from now, it's really hard to plan what that's going to look like if you have no idea, what you want to do or accomplish and to get there, or if your retirement's going to be golfing every day, well, if that's what you want, which sounds like fun, but
yeah,
you have to be able to visualize yourself golfing every day. And then when you design your retirement, then it's easy to plan for it because you have a better idea what it's going to look like.
Sure. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many different, I know when, as I was growing up, and I'm sure as you, it was the same, max out your 401k, tax deferred, pre-tax, everything's going to be taxable when you get out, but that's okay. You're going to be in a different tax bracket. But that's not true today. People are retiring in the same tax bracket because they know that what the things that they want in life are going to cost money. And so they need to make sure that they have enough income coming in. So there's all other things like the Roth and non-qualified accounts to consider as your retirement plan. But if you don't talk to someone, you don't know those things because they're just not talked about.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah. And I think it's even worse because I think if you don't talk to someone, what you get is this anxiety noise because you hear about this. If you don't understand what a Roth IRA is and how it works, but all you're sort of hearing, you're on social media, you're looking and you're seeing these things. You should be investing in a Roth. To me, those are all just anxiety producing cycles that you go through where knowledge is really power. Maybe you should be investing in a Roth, maybe you shouldn't. It's a complicated question, but if you don't understand it at all and you hear that, then it's I've really screwed up my retirement and it's all bad.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? So there is this important just capacity to understand this that is totally new, I think, really in the last 20 years. In the boomer generation, we are faced with a much more complex situation than our parents. I mean, I watched my father lived till he was 95. I watched my father retire, and he had a pension. It wasn't lavish, but he had a pension, and he had saved, and so he was able to move forward. But it was very uncomplicated. I mean, it was just he got a check. He had money in the bank. My brother did all of his financial management for him in his later years for both my parents, and so I saw this firsthand, just kind of how uncomplicated that was. I mean, for us, one of the things that I think is an interesting question for the retiree, again, a point of anxiety, is that when you retire, you are suddenly, if you've been successful with your financial planner, okay, you retire and you look at your tax deferred retirement account, and many people, I've got a 7-figure bank account. I've never
more
had
money than they ever seen before.
I've never had a 7-figure anything. Yeah.
And they don't know what to do with it.
Well, I think that is a complicated question, because I think one of the things that they might be feeling is, gee, I've got, here's my kid and they're struggling, and I've got, $1 million in the bank and my kid is struggling, and I'm kind of a bum if I don't help them out.
Yeah, but the problem comes into play, though, is if you don't have a plan in place, you don't know that you can take money out to help him out. And if you live to 95, you may run out of money.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's is to me the kind of the case in point, that you not only have this anxiety around all of this complexity, then within your own family environment, you may have more complexity there, where you're given a question you can't answer. I've got $1 million in the bank, my kid's in trouble. What's the consequences of me taking $100,000 out and helping them?
Ooh.
Well, that could be huge. That could be a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, your Social Security is more taxable. You have to pay the taxes on that, which will likely put you in a higher tax bracket. And there's just a whole
it's a
whole
question.
list of things that need to be answered before you make that decision.
Yeah. But my point is really just simply that another aspect of this is that we're just suddenly given this big pot of money that is kind of an illusion in a way. It's kind of, I take my father as an example. Well, if I've never done this experiment, but I'd like to go back and just do a calculation of, okay, given what he got as income from his pension, what would that pot of money look like when he retired? I'm sure it would have been pretty significant.
Yeah.
And but now we have the actual pot of money. Okay, we're given this, and we have to manage it. So it is just a much more complex environment that we live in. My father never, just to point out one thing, my father never worried about the stock market. Okay, he had very little invested in the stock market. He just had a pension. It was guaranteed by the government. He never worried about the stock market. That was just a kind of an interesting thing. Me, I kind of live and die.
It's not like that, and it's not like that anymore. I mean, if you're fortunate to get a pension and then you have Social Security, and you can live on both of those, then your investments become secondary to your plan. But for the majority of us out there, you'll get Social Security and then whatever you've accumulated, and then you have to be able to withdraw from that the amount that you've accumulated to maintain your lifestyle. And sometimes it is 30 years, sometimes it's longer if you retire early. And yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around that. I was talking to my CPA the other day when he was doing my taxes, and he was telling me about one of his clients that they had done so well in savings that, now they have $4 million, but $4 million, 100% taxable. So not do they have the issues, how do you withdraw tax advantage? Well, you can't. So whenever you withdraw it, it's all taxable to you. And then how do you transfer that to your children? So if they were to pass away today, their children would inherit $4 million. And with the new rules, they have to take it out within 10 years. How's that going to affect them?
Right.
Especially if they're in high income jobs. So it's not retirement planning for your dad was simple, but retirement planning today is not so simple.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And don't forget, we got to make sure we keep pace with inflation.
Yeah. I do think the taxable thing, I get it for your heirs, that can be being in a Roth can be a big advantage. But I do think that the taxable issue for traditional tax sheltered accounts is overstated, because look, if you were in if you just had it in a brokerage account, you would still have tax consequences to that. When we
not at death, because they get a step up.
No, but I'm talking about if you have money. I have a client right now who has several $1 million, and it's in some very concentrated positions, and he needs to get out of those positions. But when he sells in a traditional account, not a traditional IRA, but just a brokerage account, he's got tax consequences. So if you're living off a brokerage account, you've got the same issue of tax consequences. It's taxed as capital gains, not as as ordinary income, but it's still taxed. So
yeah, depending on what bracket you're in, yes.
Yeah.
If you're married under 100,000 in adjustable growth income, then it's zero. But you're right. Not everything's perfect, but having money in different buckets, if you have the Roth money, the non-qualified money, and the pre-tax, at least if you have that, you can manage yourself in retirement.
Sure.
You can manage your taxes. But if everything's 100% taxable, there's no management.
Yeah. I agree that having a diversified plan is the key to all of that, for sure.
But most of the retirees today were just told to max out that pre-tax bucket.
Yeah.
And so they're going into retirement with taxable income.
Yeah. Well, I'm in retirement. I retired, and I'm 100% taxable, and I'm here to tell you, I'm perfectly fine with it. I look at it this way: even if it's 100% taxable and you're having a great life, Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So you got to pay taxes.
It's
The worst situation would be to retire and not have enough money.
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So that, to me, just like as we were talking about that client of my CPA who has $4 million, like if I was the heir, I'm okay accepting that $4 million. I don't mind paying the taxes.
Yeah.
But if there's a better way for people that are coming up into that are accumulating money and looking at the different types of accounts out there to have better options in their retirement to pull money for income and then to transfer to the heirs, then they need to be educated about that. But still, I'm not passing up $4 million.
Yeah.
Just saying.
And since we're going down this path, this is back to the whole Roth piece, which I completely agree. When you are accumulating, everything you can put into a Roth is probably a good deal. I think Roth. Right. I think if you're 55 and you're looking at doing Roth conversions, I think that's an entirely different question, and you're banking on the future, and I've just seen a lot of Roth recommendations that I really question their.
I would agree with you on that. I would agree. It doesn't make sense. It's a nice tool if you can use the tool correctly, but just to do it so you have tax-free money, may not be the best option.
It's back to being the financial therapist. I think one of the things that we really love about the whole Roth idea is that I'm going to have this pile of tax-free money. I'm not paying any taxes. Well, you paid all these taxes up front, which you could have been earning and then paid a slice of that as taxes. But there's this emotional magnet of, oh man, I got out from under these taxes, and look at this is so great. So there's a whole emotional context to that piece of it as well.
So it's making sure, just as long as your investments are diversified, your allocation is making sure you're diversified over all different accounts. I mean, that's the perfect world. And now Roth 401ks are more available to people, so it does give them that option to have both. So maybe you're putting some in the Roth 401k and you're putting some in the pre-tax. Based on that should be a conversation between your planner and your CPA to make sure that it makes sense for you. But there are more options available now for people to do the Roth than there were before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's just making sure. I think summing up our whole conversation is find a financial planner that you like, trust, and start working with them and stop having that conversation and don't worry that you don't have enough or you don't think you have enough or whatever. If you need to reach out to a financial therapist for that help, great. But just even talking to someone like yourself or even a financial planner, it will help you. First of all, it gives you so much more peace of mind when you have a plan.
Yep.
And you review it annually. You don't put it in the drawer and never look at it again for 10 years. Or you review it annually and you have these conversations that gets you to where when you do get into retirement and you have that peace of mind that it's going to be okay, that is so worth just taking that fear you have and making the appointment.
For sure. Yeah, completely agree.
So if someone would like to get a hold of you and work with you, how would they get a hold of you?
Okay, so I'm at, my website is financial-therapy.me. And that's got...
And do you work with everybody all over the country or just in a certain area?
I do everything virtually. I'm a licensed social worker in Colorado, but I do financial therapy all over the country. I'm not a financial planner. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm there to help you.
But that's a good thing. Yeah. But that's a good thing because although I understand what you're saying and work with people through all of those conversations because I get it, but there's a lot of planners out there that don't get that part of it, and it's very important. Your mindset is huge when it comes to all aspects of your life, but especially when it comes to money.
For sure.
So I really appreciate you spending time with me today. Easy conversation.
Yeah.
I like it when we both think the same. Like we both have the same. I don't want to say attitude, but maybe that's the right word about how to handle this whole topic. And I think the more people realize that it's okay to reach out, ask questions, educate yourself. By people talking about it and taking the fear away from these types of conversations, you're just going to have so much more going forward.
Yeah, that's what I'm all about, is just helping people to take those first steps. There's a lot that follows that, but if you're not going to take the first step, you're never getting down the road.
Correct. And that goes for every aspect of your life. Even when you're going on a diet, you want to lose weight, you got to take that first step to accomplish that goal. And, the same thing goes when you're working with your money, you got to take that first step. So I appreciate you spending time with me today. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
If anybody needs or wants to talk to John, please reach out to him. His contact information will be in the show notes. And if you'd like to talk with me, you can reach me at paula@paulachristine.com. Thanks again, John.
Okay. Thank you, Paula.